Hello and welcome to Mirror Realm. My name's Nick, known as Wyvern on the Discord servers. Today I'm going to look at why Arthurian Legends, the box opening experience, it's just not as good as beta. I don't want to be too negative about it. I still quite enjoy opening them, and we opened a lot of Arthurian Legends boxes, but I think that's part of the reason why we're quite accepting about it. We've opened enough, let's say, to be able to get over the really bad ones, I guess you could say, a bit more easily, just because you have more total boxes, some good ones sprinkled in there, and you can look at the big picture. However, if you had only opened one box or one case, it's possible you could just get totally hosed big time with Arthurian Legends. I've seen boxes open that didn't have a single card in there worth more than about $6 US. And whenever I'm talking monetary amounts in this video, despite the fact that I'm in Australia, I'm going to use US dollars just to make it easier for everybody to wrap their head around what I'm talking about. So in the case that you do get one of these boxes where none of the cards are worth more than about, any given card wasn't worth more than about $6, you can experience something like a 75% or even more loss on what you paid for the box if you paid MSRP. If you get 6 boxes in a case, you can get multiple such boxes. You could not open a single box where you came out ahead of what you paid for it. You can truly lose. You know, even with 12 boxes, again, like those types of numbers, and they're pretty big numbers. I mean, for a lot of people to buy 12 booster boxes of Arthurian Legends, that's a lot. For a lot of people, that's way more than they're ever going to buy. And at that number, you can get, totally hosed big time in regards to what you open. You can come out way behind if you paid, if you paid MSRP. So that being said, obviously with beta you can still come out behind, but from my experience, it's pretty rare that, provided again you're paying MSRP for the box, which you can get them for that around now with the latest reprint. Provided you're paying MSRP, I don't know, maybe 40% loss or something like that on a box. And if you're talking about 6 boxes or 12 boxes, the worst case scenario, you're probably coming out at a 25% loss. Probably not even. In the worst case scenario, that is. So not typical or anything. So you've got a worst case, in the case of beta, that you might lose. You come out about, basically come out with around at a 40% loss. So around 60% of what you paid in a box. That's about your worst case scenario. But in the case of Arthurian Legends, you end up with maybe about 25% of what you paid, which, oh my, does that feel bad when that happens. So I just want to, there's some other bits around this that I'll just tackle off in this video as well, but I've not really heard anybody talk about this much as to why. Like, why is this the case? I think I've asked the question to some people because I've been thinking about this in the background for quite a while now, and just sort of making notes here and there. There's one predominant issue. I'm going to get to that last, and that's going to be the majority of what we talk about. And there's a few other issues which we'll just cover those off first. There are things that some of these I've heard a bit, but I don't think they're the real issue. Not the real. They're all real issues, but it's not there's one major issue, and we're going to cover that off. But let's start with one of the things that I've heard talk about the most, which are the fake uniques. I think there's 16 of those in the set, I believe. Just checking my notes, sorry, quickly. I think there's 16. Is that right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Let's just go with that. If I'm wrong, apologies. So I think there's 16 fake uniques, and there's a few things I just wanted to cover off about these. So firstly, Arthurian Legends, I believe, was designed to be a draft set And through that lens, I believe it's really good. It's really fun to draft Arthurian Legends. I run events. I maybe run in my local city. I run all the events. So, for a long time, we didn't have any beta. We only had Arthurian Legends. So we were doing, every week, we were just doing drafts. Because sealed isn't that great with Arthurian Legends, I don't think. But draft's really good. I think we might have done, I don't know, 10 or more Arthurian Legend events that were just in a row that were Arthurian Legends draft. Something like that, around 10. And when beta came back into stock, and first thing we did was like, we did a beta draft, for a change, and it's noticeably worse, the experience, for sure. I'm not saying that beta is not fun, by the way, and I think sealed format is very good. Like 6 Arthurian Legends is pretty bad, but 4 Arthurian Legends and 2 beta is really good for sealed. I also quite like draft with 2 Arthurian Legends and 1 beta, but there is a noticeable difference. I think it's through the lens of, it was designed as a draft set. I think it was a success. To cut to the chase here, and I say that coming from a place of somebody who's drafted it a lot. So. And I think the fake uniques contribute towards that success. I think they make the experience better. And I'm sure that's why it was done. However, there are some issues with them, I think. And perhaps let's just talk about them. So firstly, the other side of this coin is that not every box of Arthurian Legends that's been opened was open to draft with it. In fact, I would have a guess that only a very small percentage of all the boxes that have ever been opened of Arthurian Legends were open to draft with them. I would be gobsmacked if it was 10% of them. I imagine the number is closer to 0 than 10. Let's put it that way. I imagine it's sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%, somewhere in that range. So, whilst, it was a success through that lens, you do have to consider that, 90, 95% or something like that of all the product that's been opened has not been opened for that experience. It's been opened for a different experience. Now, I'm not saying that I don't think that means that it was a bad idea. Like, people need to play this game. It's important that the draft experience was good. So I'm not saying, I'm just saying what I'm saying. Nothing more, nothing less. It's just, it matters that the draft experience was good, but I believe it also matters a lot that the box opening experience is really good, and that probably matters. I don't necessarily want to say more, but it matters a lot. It matters an awful lot, and because that's, for most people, most of the product that's being opened, that's what's happening with it. So that's super important. And when you open a pack and you get a fake unique, it feels really bad. Super bad. And there's reasons for that. I think it's one, because for a moment you thought you got a real unique and you didn't. So it's like you get your hopes up and then you get let down. And then the other issue is that they're even worse than regular elite, because any given deck can only have one of them, so everybody needs less of them in their collections. So they're basically, not only did you think you got a real unique and then you were tricked and you only got an elite instead, then you kind of only also half of an elite as well. That just feels really bad. That's the thing. Like, at the end of the day, people feel how they feel, and whilst you can say all sorts of stuff to tell them why they shouldn't feel how they feel, and say, well, it's just part of it, you should know better, and And I don't know, say whatever you want to say, but at the end of the day, like, emotions are emotions. In the moment, especially. Afterwards, you can, open up a whole bunch of packs and put all your fake uniques off to the side somewhere where you're never going to do anything with them, and you just forget about it and you're okay with it. But in the moment when you actually open the pack, it feels bad. And what you want when people are opening packs, you want them to feel good, not bad. I would have thought, obviously, but that's an issue. That's a real issue, that it just feels bad. Like, I don't want to understate how big an issue that is. It's a really big issue. And let's move on, because I think that's the thing that gets, get a lot of people talking about that. And I think the main reason why it's got a lot of noise is literally because of how people feel when they open them. So another issue here is that they're confusing. You've got the rarity scheme tied to these words like unique, elite, and so on. And then you've also got the mechanics of the game tied to that for how many you can include in a deck. And then you've just completely broken that relationship, or that correlation, or whatever you want to call it, between those two things. It's gone, and it's confusing. It's confusing for a lot of people. And even now, we have people, even now, every event is opening the packs to draft them, and it's like every draft without exception, someone's going to ask, is so-and-so a real unique? Because I'm pretty sure I've just about wrapped my head around it. But who are the real ones? Who are the true uniques as such? But it's beyond what you could realistically expect most people to remember. So that's just confusing. And then you end up with scenarios where in drafts, there can be other feel bad moments because of this. Because somebody didn't think it was a real unique, and then they passed the card, and then it turns out that it really was a real unique. And then, they're not happy about that they passed up the card that they would bloody blah. Like, the fact that it's confusing creates confusion, unsurprisingly. And I think that's an issue as well, quite frankly, for the act, whilst it helps for the limited and the draft experience, that effectively they appear more often, so there's more chance they'll end up in decks and they'll be played more. That's good. But when you're confusing people that are paying for these drafts, and let's face it, the MSRP on this is pretty high. When you're playing, it's not like you lob up in a store and you're paying $5 or something to play. You're paying some actual real money to play, and there's every chance that you might only get an opportunity to draft one or two cards that are actually worth anything. And if you just pass one of those up thinking that it was a fake unique when it wasn't, But I mean, there's, to some degree, the saving grace here that even the real unique ones, none of them are particularly great value-wise, but still, they're still worth something. And it isn't just about the money always, right? It's about the fact that it's real unique. People might not have it for their collection. They want to. It just feels bad again if that happens, and you just don't really want people to be confused in that way, in my opinion. Or to put another way, like somebody shows up for. This is way more of an issue, by the way, when in the case of foils, by the way. So. Like, whilst financially, I mean, you can potentially have somebody giving up, whatever, I'm just saying random, like Sir Lancelot or something, foil, to take a, non-foil unique that's really good for the draft, for their deck, or maybe even one that's worth quite a bit of money, like a Tri-Side or something, and thinking that it's a fake unique, and... or not even sure what's going on. Oh, that's enough for someone to potentially quit the game if that type of thing happens. So, I think that's a real issue, that it's confusing. I think that's sort of the main issues with it, really, and they're pretty significant issues. Let's be fair here. So, I think I don't really want to go talking about solutions too much. Point of this really is to raise what I believe are the issues, just to make sure that brought to attention. There's some healthy discussion. I don't want to necessarily prescribe what are the solutions to things, but in this one in particular, I have had a lot of hands-on experience opening packs, going through the emotions, thinking about it, watching other people open packs, doing drafts and stuff. So this one I'm going to suggest a few things, in this one in particular. So I think that it should be, there should be some way to look at the card and be able to know that it's not a real unique. I don't care what it is. It doesn't matter what it is. But there should be some way where if I'm running a draft and I'm telling people, look, if you get a unique and it's got this little whatever it is, this way to know, just look at that and you know. Like, oh my, that would have helped a lot, I think. And you also have to consider that just, like arguably even the integrity of the draft is somewhat compromised when you've got multiple people saying, I've got this whatever, so whoever in my hand, is it real or not? And then everybody knows, like, you're not supposed to be talking about what cards are in your hand around the table. So it's, there's an issue there as well. So I think, look at the card. You should be able to tell somehow. If, it can say it's unique for purposes of deck construction and whatever, but somehow, some way, it should have just be denoted so people can know that it's not an actual unique in regards to the rarity. I think another suggestion, I've been thinking about this a lot because I think it did improve the draft, so the drafting experience. So been really trying to think of ways to have implemented this, because I think it helped with that, but implement it in such a way that these other issues that we're talking about either don't exist or they're much more mild in nature, let's say. So I think if you could look at it and you could know if it's a unique or not, that's one. And the other big one, I think that they should not have been in the elite slot. I think they should have been in the last ordinary slot. They just have whatever. There's just a chance that one of the ordinaries is instead one of them, and you're not then stealing somebody's real unique or elite card from them. Psychologically, that would feel way better if it was just replacing. Because basically, people look at it through the lens like their good card stolen from them, their valuable card stolen from them. They could have had a Ring of Morrigan or whatever, but instead they got this piece of trash type of thing. That's how people are feeling. Whereas if it was in an ordinary slot instead, that's gone. Like, people aren't going to feel that way at all. So I think with those two things, if you could look at it and know that it wasn't a real unique, and if it was just at the end in an ordinary slot, I think nearly every issue that people have with them would just be gone with those two changes. Now, I'm not saying they would have ordinary rarity, by the way. I'm just saying have whatever frequency you want them to occur, they occur at that frequency. But there's just a chance that that one of the ordinaries is swapped out, just in much the same way that there's a chance one of them is swapped out for a foil, or there's a chance that one of them swapped out for a curio. So it's something not too dissimilar to that. So I think let's move on. I think that those two things they would basically solve all the issues. So if the powers that be are hearing this, I would please raise that up, because honestly, you don't want to understate how bad it is that when people are opening packs, you want them to feel good. You don't want to feel bad. So, and again, you don't want to confuse people as to what's going on. So I think that would really help. Moving on, issue number 2 on my list is that there are exactly one unique per 5 packs, and there's 24 packs in a box, which means that there are exactly 4.8 uniques per box, and there's always 4 true uniques, ignoring fake uniques and ignoring foils. There's always either exactly 4 or exactly 5. You basically have 4.8. So 4 and 5 boxes have 5 uniques. and 1 in 5 has 4 uniques. I have seen a lot of Arthurian Legends boxes open. An awful lot. And I have never seen... Put in the comments if you've ever seen it. I've never seen any number other than 4 or 5 uniques opened in a box. And what this means is that people know it. People know that there is. Like, you can literally open the packs. You know that there's exactly that many. You also know that there's exactly 6 foils, right? So if you're opening packs, and I think this is a bit of an issue, to be honest, because you can be opening packs, you're doing a box opening, you've opened 5 uniques, you've opened 6 foils, you know for a fact that there is nothing left in those remaining packs in the box, and I don't think that is good. Not good from a secondary market type thing for people selling them and ripping people off, not good from a opening them up yourself perspective, which is just what we do. You know, opening up a bunch of packs at the end when you know that there's nothing in them, it doesn't feel good at all. Again, another feel bad moment. So it's just, that's an issue as well. And then the big thing here is that when you open a box, that's only that, you know, we're saying 4 in 5 boxes have 5 uniques. 1 in 5 has 4 uniques. How do you think you feel when you open a 4 uniques in a box? Again, you feel like you had a unique stolen from you, like, or something. Like, it feels bad. Again, another feel bad moment. And that's an issue. Like, the fact that you know that there's, like, it's just completely flat, completely known, and there's always 4 or 5. Like, the fact when you get a 4, it just feels bad. And then there is another issue with just the way they're distributed or whatever the case is. But then to make it a super feel bad moment, it seems that a lot of the boxes, this is just anecdotal, by the way, I've not seen enough volume. Whilst I'm sort of saying I've seen a lot of boxes, I'm saying maybe like 100 boxes or something like that I think I've witnessed being opened one way or another. If you're talking about full cases being opened, I don't have a big enough sample size of this for it to be anything other than anecdotal. But anecdotally, it does not seem to be the case that if you open up a box of 6, then 1 of them will have 4, 4 of them will have 5, and the remaining 1, you know, will have 4 or 5 type of thing. It feels very much like when you open up a case that has a box with 4 in it, there's a pretty good chance you're going to end up with sort of 3 or 4, maybe 5 boxes that only have 4 in it as well, only have 4 in them, which feels really bad as well. So that's another issue there. Just that the completely predictable number of uniques, but in particular, because it's a 20% chance that you will get 4, it feels like you've been scammed with a dud box, something like that, right? You got unlucky. It feels bad. Whereas, for example, let's say for argument's sakes that 4 and 5 boxes had 5, as we're saying, but the 1 in 5, rather than having 4, it had, let's say it had 6 instead, right? So in that case, 5 would be considered normal. You'd be okay with that. That's the norm. But if you happen to get the one with 6, you would feel like you were lucky, right? It'd feel good. It'd feel really good that you got the bonus one. And the difference here is just that, you know, you've established the norm, which is what happens 80% of the time, and then what happens 20% of the time. If that's worse, it's going to feel bad when it happens. Whereas if that's better, it's going to feel good when it happens. It's a very important distinguishment to me. So I think, for example, in summer beta, so the second print run of beta, there was 7.2 uniques per booster box, I believe. So it was the same concept. So you always got 7, but there was a 20% chance that you would get a lucky box, let's say, that had an 8th unique, and it would feel really good. Now, the third wave of beta, I think it's not completely predictable like that. I think there's a little bit more variance. You can get a bit more. Yeah, it's not quite exactly like that. But for the summer beta, it was just to illustrate the picture. So, you know, when that happened, when you get the 20% chance with 8 instead of 7, it felt really good. So that's just something to be aware of there. And yeah, it's like I've heard people say, like, the only problem with Arthurian Legends is that it's a smaller box size. Well, it's not the only problem. There's other problems, but why it being smaller as well, going into that. And this is one of the reasons why a smaller box size is a problem, and it's because because of this exact issue, because you've got 24 packs, which means you end up with 4.8 uniques. So it's going to feel bad when you end up with less than 5. Basically, it's one of the reasons why the smaller box is bad. Let's talk a little bit more about. Let's just flow into it. So the smaller box size. So there is this issue that we just covered off. That's one of them. And I think the other main issue is, I think there's a perspective of, like, what does a box opening experience look like? How long is that supposed to take? What's the optimal amount of packs for it sort of feeling like the box opening experience itself was like a story or a journey or something? And it feels, when we open Arthurian Legends, it does feel like it's cut a little bit short. Like you're opening a box and it doesn't quite last as long as how you feel it's supposed to last. But part of that is just because how you feel was probably established by beta. And we even opened up quite a few alpha boxes because we backed the Kickstarter and got quite a bit. So it's, they were even bigger. So if you compare alpha to Arthurian Legends, you're going from 39 to 24. That's like a massive reduction. So, it feels like it's a lot less because it is a lot less, pretty much. And so there's a question there about, again, feeling. But then, that's going to be different from person to person anyway. So, but the bigger thing here, I think, is that there is, the smaller the box size, the less opportunity that there is for there to be for regression to the mean to occur, basically, which is it means, like, the more packs that you open, the more chance there is that you'll end up with an average box, pretty much. You won't be behind or ahead. It's possible, for example, that you could open up one booster pack and it could have a foil Philosopher's Stone in it, for example, right? And if you open a pack and you got a foil Philosopher's Stone, and I opened up a pack and got nothing, you're way ahead. But if you gave us 1 million packs each, we would be within 0 point something % of total value within each other. If you gave us 100,000 packs each, we would probably be within 1%, maybe a bit more. If you gave us 1,000 packs, we'd be within a couple % of each other, and so on, right? So when you sort of say the difference between 24 and 36 is that you're still going to have, we could each open a box of 24 packs or each open a box of 36 packs, and definitely one of us could come out way ahead. But the less packs you have, the more prospect and the more scope and the more frequency there is that will occur. So to put all of this in another way, the less packs you have, the more chance there is that you're going to end up with a really bad. The less packs you have, the more chance of a really bad box and more chance of a good box, in theory. So it's just something there to bear in mind. If you have that with a bigger box, there's less chance that it's going to be a total disaster, pretty much. Next issue is the higher MSRP. I think. Sorry, I'll just try to. If you're not quite wrapping your head around what I meant on the previous point, maybe an easier way to illustrate with this would just be with. In Arthurian Legends, there's exactly 6 foils in a box. In a beta, there's exactly 9. So if you imagine when you're opening up a box, just the foils in isolation for a second here. If you take 6 of the 9 foils in any given beta box versus the full 9, there's a good chance if you took the first 6 that you opened and so on, like quite a lot of the time, if there was a foil that was worth a lot, literally 1/3 of the time, it's going to be in the other 3 foils, right? So if you're saying that a third of the time you're missing your best foil card, basically, right? If you're only getting 6 instead of 9, that's another way to sort of look at it, perhaps. And then there's more scope that all your foils are going to be bad, basically, if you have less of them. But that's just a way to sort of, it's a bit obvious, but yeah, maybe that might help, just to, rather than thinking in terms of packs, if you just think in terms of foils, I guess is what I'm saying. So rather than thinking 24 versus 36 packs, what that might look like, yeah, just think of when you're opening foils, how boom or bust they can be. And yeah, there's obviously a difference between 6 and 9. So the higher MSRP, I think, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, especially if I'm way off in the comments, because I don't know what the MSRP was in the States. I know what it was in Australia, so I've kind of translated what I think the numbers were a bit. So I think beta is around 150 US a box, and Arthurian Legends was around 130, I believe. So I think the MSRP for Arthurian Legends is higher, obviously, per pack. It's quite a bit higher, actually. And it's so close, in fact, to the box price of beta that, again, ignore the specifics, because it almost feels like it's within a margin of so similar to the price that it's basically, to a lot of people psychologically at least, is the same price. And I know in Australia, for example, I don't want to talk too much about Australian dollars, but it's just to give an example, like when beta was first released, we could pre-order those, I believe, at $219, $219 Australian, and Arthurian Legends was $195. So you're talking the difference between, yeah, it's like really, it's whatever, $26 or something. Like, it was such Australian, it was such a small difference that it basically felt like you were paying the same price. I know you weren't, but I'm just talking about how people feel, right? So and you're only getting 2/3 of a box. Again, how you feel. I think if the MSRP had been 2/3 of the MSRP for beta's 150, right? So if Arthurian Legends MSRP was 100 instead of 130, that would have made a big difference as well. So I think the higher MSRP is a real problem as well. I mean, at the end of the day, it is what it is, and I don't know what constraints they're working around, and if it couldn't have been cheaper, if it had to be that, whatever, I don't know. But it's a problem. This is the thing. It's a problem realistically if you've got a product that's supposed to be what the MSRP is, but nobody will buy it for that much because it's not worth that much, and then creates all sorts of problems that other people have covered in other videos. I don't want to get into distribution and stuff, but it's like, if the distributors, it's an issue basically. If they can't sell it, that's a problem. You don't want them to struggle to sell it. You don't want them to sort of fire sale it. You don't want people who shops and store, card shops and whatnot, local game stores and stuff that bought the product. You don't want them to not be able to sell it. You don't want them to have to sell it at a loss, and so on. Like, it's just the higher MSRP without effectively increased price without increased value. That's the problem. So increased price is a problem without the increased value, right? And then you had, which I guess, if we talk about where the secondary market, let's just look at here. So Arthurian Legends booster box, what's this, like 89 US, right? So that's where it's landed. I think the MSRP was around 130. It's gone all the way down to 89. What's that, around 30% under MSRP, something like that. And actually, if we look at beta, it's about just over 153. I think that's around MSRP. If you actually, do the math here, it's like, well, that's 2/3 of this amount it's what 153 nearly, so it's 51, right? Sorry, 51 is a third, so it's $102, right? Would be 2/3 of this, so 24 packs of beta is 102. It's quite a bit, This is quite a bit more than this. So what you're saying is the MSRP per pack for beta was quite a lot more. Sorry, for Arthurian Legends was quite a bit more than beta. But the current price that you can buy this stuff for in the market or online or wherever, like the actual market value of this stuff, the Arthurian Legends is worth quite a bit less per pack than beta. So that's an issue, right? So not only the MSRP is higher, but the actual amount you can sell it for is less per pack. So now let's get into the real meat, let's say, or what the issues are with the set. So I think it's that all these other factors matter, especially the MSRP. But I think here, I touched upon it before, it's you have an increased, higher MSRP, but you don't have increased value in the box. In fact, you actually have less value. So you have less packs, but there's less within those packs as well. And there's a couple of bits that we can talk about quickly first with this, and then get into the main issue. So one, I think, is that real iconic characters from Arthurian Legends, or objects, places, whatever, stuff that's super iconic, like Merlin, Sir Lancelot, King Arthur, Queen Guinevere, Lady of the Lake, Excalibur, Round Table, Camelot. They're all trash. They're pretty bad cards. I know Merlin's worth a bit, but it's, well, we think it's unplayable when constructed. Let's put it that way. So now people would debate that, but we don't think it's very good at all. And if you had have asked me before Arthurian Legends come out, here's the names of the cards, what do you think the best card in the set is going to be? I mean, I don't think it would have been Ring of Morrigan, let's put it that way. I think it would have been Merlin, or maybe King Arthur or something. It would have been my guess, right? So if you had said what would the most powerful item in the game be, it would have been Ring of Morrigan. Pretty sure I would have said Excalibur. And so on. So you have an issue here with just a lot of the real iconic cards that should have been, some of the most collectible stuff. The cards are just not very good. Which, in turn, there was possibility that, Morgana is another iconic character, for example, but she actually is good, and she's worth a lot, right? So it's just, that's pretty small, but I think that's part of it. Is just a lot of the real iconic stuff in Arthurian Legends. The cards are just really bad. Another thing is just that I was sort of waiting for this to happen in the Dust Store to see what they ended up doing. In particular for the Druid and the Bruin and Tawny foils, because their absence from the set in the boxes, as foils, was an obvious loss of value, and because they would have been super collectible, people would have wanted them, and they could have been. We'll get into a set what some of these big issues with the set are, but they could have been in like elite rarity sort of slots for the foils. They would have been super collectible, and people would want them. They would have had quite a bit of value. if you're worried about accessibility, could have put him in exceptional rarity slot, could have put him in ordinary rarity slot. If you were really worried about accessibility. So, and they would have added whatever rarity slot they were in. If they were in the ordinary rarity slots, they would have been the most valuable ordinary foils. If they were in the exceptional foils, they would have been the most valuable exceptional foils in the set. And if they were elite, they would have been, right in the top few elites. So they would have added value for sure. Now, I'm not saying they should have been, and I'm not saying it was a bad decision. I think it was quite a long wait for them to get to the dust store. Because the thing is, it's not necessarily here. You have to consider that it's not just necessarily what's best for the consumer as such through the lens of the dust store and the boxes. Like, it's important that these boxes sell and that they don't get stuck at distributors or in shops and stuff, right? And if having put Druid and Bruin and Tawny as foils into these boxes could have added some value and have helped a lot more of them sold for boxes sold for a higher price, then that's really important. So it's just a factor. I'm not unhappy with the dust store implementation, let's say, of them. They just absolutely would have been chase cards if they were in those packs, and they absolutely would have added value and helped, contributed a little bit towards all of these issues. With the issue in particular with the sort of decreased value in the set but increased MSRP. It would have helped, increase the value a bit. And they would have had its own issues a little bit, obviously, because it was designed as a draft set, and then you've got these cards. Effectively, you can't play any of those cards if you draft them, because you can't play Tawny or Bruin, and you can't play half of a Druid card, one of the 2 fours or whatever. So, it wouldn't have been great for that, and that's one thing they were going for with this. I'm not saying I don't understand the decision. I totally understand it, and I'm not even saying I disagree with it. All I'm saying is literally what I'm saying, which is there's a real issue here of higher MSRP, lower value, and this would have helped add value. And you still could have done something in the dust store with that. You could have had, for example, alternate art stuff for the Druid and Bruin and Tawny. That would have still been really popular. So I'm not saying it would have been at the expense of the dust store. You still could have done something there. Yep, so I think I'll just leave it at that. So I'm not saying I disagree with the decision at all. Just to make that clear. Let's get into the main issue here. The main issue, I believe, is the set composition. And that results in the value in the set being nearly entirely concentrated on the unique cards. And that creates a lot to this boom or bust type approach, because when you're opening a box, basically, if you open a box of Arthurian Legends, if you don't open a unique foil, a true unique foil, barring some really specific combinations of cards, you're almost certainly coming out at a loss if you paid MSRP for it, the box. Even if you open a true unique foil, you could still be, running at a loss. It's borderline impossible to come out ahead in a box if you don't open a true unique foil. Now, you can, obviously, because you can open like a foil Valley of Delight, and you can get a Ring of Morrigan and a Trite. Like, it's possible, but practically speaking, I've seen a lot of boxes open. I don't know if I've ever seen a box that come out ahead that didn't have a Ring of Morrigan non-foil or a unique foil, true unique foil. I think that may be a true statement. So The value's really concentrated. Not at all the case in beta, and we'll get into that. We'll get into it, and we'll get into why. So it's totally possible in beta. Well, I opened the box of beta, I think got nothing much at all in unique or elite, but got a foil ruins and a foil backstab, and really good box, pretty much. Even though, nothing unique at all with anything, basically. So let's get into it. So if we look at the set composition of beta, it's 66 uniques, 103 elites, 128 exceptionals, 110 ordinaries. In Arthurian Legends, it's 55 uniques, 56 elites. It's actually 57, I believe. Or 50. Yeah, it's a bit wonky, these numbers. Like, it's a bit difficult to work it out exactly because Templar is not really in the set, but he kind of is if he's foil. So he's not in non-foil, but he is foil. You've got 16 of these are fake uniques put into the elite slot, and then you've also got Bruin, that's an elite, but isn't actually anywhere in the set, foil or non-foil, because it's only in the box topper and not in there as foil. So I think there's 57, including Bruin, which is removed. So if you're talking about foils, there's 56. But if there's non-foils, I believe there's only 55 different elites, because this Templar isn't really there that you can open in a pack. There's 55 exceptionals and 56 ordinaries. Let's just go with 56 for the purposes of math, but it's, depending on how you look at it, it's 55 or 56. Now, how rare something is, it's sort of completely... What makes something rare is how rare it is compared to other things. It's scarcity compared to other things. Calling something unique, it's just a name. To some degree, it's completely arbitrary, and that's obvious in the case of these fake uniques, right? But the uniques in beta are not the same as the uniques in Arthurian Legends. And we'll look at that through the lens of everything else that isn't the uniques. So if you imagine for a second in beta that, there's 66 uniques and there's 103 elites. So there's that for any, when you're opening a pack, let's just look at here. So for any given unique in beta, let's just say for every Philosopher's Stone that exists, ignore the precon decks from this equation, by the way. They changed these numbers, but for every Philosopher's Stone that exists, there are 2.56 earthquakes that exist, and the reason for that is because you can look at this here. So you can say there's 66 uniques. So if we were to open, for any given to open those 66 uniques, we would, assuming we don't get any duplicate uniques, there's the same amount of uniques that are for each unique. This, again, ignoring the precons, there's the same amount of each unique printed. So you're going to open 4 booster packs that don't have a unique for every one booster pack you open that does have a unique. This is for non-foils. So, and then you're basically going to open up 4 elites for every unique. That's what that means. But you have a different number of uniques and elites. So if we take the number of uniques, which is 66, multiply that for each of those you open, you're going to open up 4 other packs that don't have a unique. That's going to take us, let's just delete this out for a second. So that's going to take us to 264. We're going to, for every 66 uniques we open, we're going to open 264 elites, basically. And then from those 264 elites, we have 103 different possible elites that we can open. And from there, we basically can say that for any given unique that exists, there's 2.56 elites that exist. Now in Arthurian Legends, if we do that same math, because again you can see here it's basically this, it's basically the same number. So we end up with 3.93 elites per unique. If we extrapolate this out here to do the same thing for exceptionals, this nearly double the amount of any given exceptional in Arthurian Legends for each unique in Arthurian Legends compared to beta. And the reason for that, you can see that here, because in beta there's a huge number of exceptional cards. And then we've done the same thing again for the ordinaries. So for each Philosopher's Stone or whatever, there's 32 and a quarter boss trolls, or whatever you want to say. So, and in Arthurian Legends there's 52.79. How we've ended up with 53.75 is just because we've foil cards replace ordinaries, so I factored that in. So if we assume for a second, and I'm not saying we should, but assume for the purpose of this exercise that the beta print run is the same size as the Arthurian Legends print run, just assume that for a second, you end up with so you end up with way more of any given cards here, because you've got, imagine that there's an exceptional card, let's say Ruins, versus something in Arthurian Legends that's exceptional, let's say I don't know, Saracen Raiders, right? So not only you've got 7.73 of these, so let's say you can take that and divide by that. So you've basically got nearly 2 Saracen Raiders for every Ruins that exists. But but that doesn't take into consideration the fact that the set size is also nearly double. So what's the set size again? I don't remember. Let's have a look. Game cards. Close that tab. So if we go quick filters, any set, if we go beta, there's 407 cards, and Arthurian Legends is 223. So if we just go 223 over, I don't know if these are the exact numbers, but we'll just roll with it for now. So it was 223 divided by 407. So if we take that number here, so you end up with more like 3.5. So if the total print run of Arthurian Legends and beta is the same, for any given exceptional that exists in beta, there are 3.5 of each, except 3.5 times more of each exceptional in Arthurian Legends. So there are way more. Now, I don't know if they're the size of the print run. So let's just, for the arguments of make the math simple in this, all of this, let's just assume that the size of the Arthurian Legends print run, format, number, percentage, is the difference in the set size. So let's say this Arthurian Legends print run size was 55% of the size of beta, and if that's true, then we can get rid of all that. We can just say, for every 7.73 exceptionals of any given exceptional that exists in beta, there's 15, basically, right? So nearly double. So you end up with a situation that elites are much rarer in beta compared to what elites are in Arthurian Legends. Exceptionals are way, way, way rarer compared to... Now, I don't mean exceptionals as in the exceptional slots here. I'm talking about each individual exceptional card is way rarer than each individual exceptional card in Arthurian Legends. And, the ordinary ones, again, right? But so you can see it's pretty... I don't know what the percent difference is here. So what is it? Format, number, percent. Yeah, so it's 53% over. Here, it's nearly double though. in the case of the exceptionals, and 64% over for the ordinaries. So I'm going to look at now what this actually means, though. Let's have a look at, to illustrate this with just some card values, right? So if we look at, these are beta elites, TCG player, and I've just sorted by market price. And if you can see here, $5, whatever, 3, so on. If we look at Arthurian Legends, you've got Valley of Delight, and that's it basically, right? And pretty quickly you're under $1. If we go back to beta, go down quite a way. So there's just quite a bit more value in the elites. I mean, look at this, honestly. Like the average price here, the average price of an elite is going to be close to 50 cents. Pretty much. Because if you look here, look at all these, way under 14 cents, 18 cents, 18 cents. And then you also have to consider that actually these are also all elites here, and they are, as we're saying, 11 cents for an elite, because they're just worth less than regular elites because of what we already discussed earlier, because you only need half as many for your collection. So you've got, the average price of those is going to be close, way less than beta, basically. Way less than beta. So, if we can go, let's go to the exceptionals, just again to illustrate. If you look at this, it's possible that you can, $2, $1, it's possible you can actually get some exceptional cards worth a little bit in Arthurian Legends. Sorry, in beta, but in Arthurian Legends, we sort by, it's not playing nice, right? You've got, but their box top is only 20 cents, right? So literally you've got exceptionals that are worth 10 times more. 21 cents, most valuable, right? Look how many exceptionals we can go through in beta. Here, Shield Maidens. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So there's 25 exceptionals in beta that are worth more than the most valuable exceptional in Arthurian Legends. If we look at the uniques, it's going to be not this story at all, because the uniques are basically the what's happened is that the elites are not diluted because of the way that the set composition works and the way that the rarity scheme and the pack composition works. What happens is that the elites will hold their integrity. It's just everything else that gets diluted compared to the rarest thing, basically. So you've got Ring of Morrigan, $92. You got some value down here. If we go to beta, I think on average probably the uniques are probably worth a bit more in Arthurian Legends than in beta. If we scroll down here, what's that? $1.58. If we scroll down here, if I had to guess, I would say they're similar, but it's not materially less in Arthurian Legends, right? So it's important to point out. Now let's look where the real value is for a second. So let's look at foils. So you've got in beta, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and that's part of the issue to some degree, that there isn't really anything much going on with the Arthurian Legends. So in beta, for example, you have the misprinted Blink and the corrected version, and they're worth loads, basically. Like, you hit either of these in a foil, and you've basically got the equivalent of one of the best unique cards you can get. Not foil, but non. It's like one of the best few cards, a Tri-Side or something. You've got Gothic Tower and foil worth $25. You've got, I don't know why the other Blizzard, the non-misprinted Blizzard, is not in here. But anyways, you've got those. You've got all of the avatars, the ordinary avatars that are worth quite a bit. Common Sense, Grapple Shot, other stuff, $7, so on, $5, like loads of stuff here. You pull an Apprentice Wizard, you pull a Grey Wolves, whatever. Like these things, you're happy if you open them. It feels pretty cool to open a full Grey Wolves or whatever. You're happy with that, and there's just quite a lot of deep value. Like I know it doesn't sound like it's only worth $5, but the thing is there's a lot of cards in beta that are worth that type of amount, and in any given box you'll open quite a few of those, and they won't even really be taking up your unique slots type of thing. So if we compare this to, what do you think this looks like in Arthurian Legends? It's not that bad. I haven't got the foil selected. Okay. So you've got a Pond worth $3, Just a Rock worth $2, a few bits worth $2, right? So again, the most valuable one is $3.29, right? Look how far down we go here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, like 30 something. But importantly, there's some real actual value here. Like it's not like this is $3. It isn't just like you've got however many cards worth more than $3. It's like nobody's going to get that excited if they open up a card that's worth $2 or $3. But they will get excited if they open a card that's worth $25 or $35. So these are like actual hits. These top end stuff here, it feels really good if you open them. So the average value there, I think I loosely worked it out. I worked it out much earlier, so apologies if it doesn't line up exactly to what everything's worth today, because I wasn't going to recalculate all of this. I'm just pulling out my notes. So the ordinaries in beta, the average ordinary in beta is $4.02, or at least it was when I calculated it a month or so ago. And the average ordinary in Arthurian Legends was $1.36. So, way less than half. A little bit more than a third. And reason for that is just because the Arthurian Legends unique foils are just not that rare compared to the ones in beta. So let's move on, because let's look at the exceptionals, because that's the one we're saying here is like the biggest discrepancy, right? How many? So let's look how that impacts the foil prices. Well, let's start here this time, right? So the most valuable foil exceptional in Arthurian Legends is $7.60. And pretty quickly you're down to $3. What, 4 cards? You're down to $3 something. If we look at the same for Arthurian Legend, for beta, $115 for Ruins. $42 for for a step, $40 for a backstab, $34 for a floodplain, $34 for a Sea Raider, 30 so on. So you basically got all the dual sites, all 6 of those worth quite a bit. You've got the backstab, you've got floodplain, Sea Raider, Holy Ground, Quarrelsome Kobolds, 15, Nova 10. Like how far down you get here, so much value here, and crazy high value, right? Like these are hitting a Ruins, even a backstab or any of this stuff. It's like big hits if you get it. If you get a foil dual land, even if it's just a lighthouse, whatever, it still feels great when you get it. So huge amount of value in the potential, here potentially if you hit a ruins or something. So let's next do the elites. So you get in Arthurian Legends, you get Valley of Delight, $51. That's pretty good. Archimago, $46. That's pretty good. Hit a Templar foil, $20. Fine. $13, whatever. It's nice. It's okay. This type of value. $10, whatever. Some of them as low as $2 or $3, $4, $5. Pretty not. Picture here. You're basically just going from what, $3, sort of up to $9 ish for the bulk and whatever. Well, let's say up to 10 ish or whatever, and you got a couple a little bit more, and then one card worth $20 and two, let's say, actually worth quite a bit. You do also have to consider here that the fake uniques would fall under this bracket as well, so I'm going to sort it this way. Yeah, so here they are. So you get whatever, $5, $6. So they're mostly falling in that range. Percival, Morian, Balin, Sabor, Sid 12. So they're falling into that sort of mid-range as well. So no big value there, but I didn't want to leave them out. Let's go to beta, shall we? So you get Mix, Aqua. So you've got a couple here, right? But the difference in beta is you just get more. So you get Mix, Aqua, Death Speaker, Observatory, Grandmaster Wizard, Elementalist, Enchantress. So what have you got going on here? So one, you've got 4 mixes. They're all worth something. You get a bunch of elite avatars. They're all worth something. And then you get some other cards. So you get Observatory, Grandmaster Wizard, Angel's Egg, Highland Falconer, Abundance, Chaos Twister, Rift Valley. So we go back here. We drop down to $13, right? If we look at quite a bit more than 13, all of these here. There's just more, big hits. If we look at, could have said the numbers before, I should have. So for the exceptionals, I've got them in my notes here. The average exceptional value in Arthurian Legends is $2.14, and the average exceptional value in beta is $8.10. So it's like 4 times as much, nearly. And for the elites, the average elite in Arthurian Legends is $10.58, and in beta it's $13.94, right? So it is higher, but I'm looking at some of these now at the time. I think the Arthurian Legends Elite Force might have dropped a little bit since then. Doesn't look like the beta ones have dropped. So, but anyways, it's a decline. It's still like, what is it, $13.94 to equals 13, $10.58, $13.94. You're still talking like 75% of the value type of thing. So on average, the elite foils are worth 75% of the amount as they are in beta. So I could put these numbers here actually. So let's just put them in. So we're saying value and frequency. So let's say the value here. So it's going to be equal to 1058 divided by 1394, and the exceptionals were $2.14 divided by $8.10, and the ordinaries were $1.36 divided by $4.02. So format number percent. So here you can see, right, like 70. So literally the exceptionals, the average exceptional foil in Arthurian Legends is like a quarter of what it's worth in beta. The average ordinary in Arthurian Legends is like a third of what it's worth in beta, and the average elite is worth like 75% of what it's worth in beta. If we look at the uniques foils, the true unique foils, I'm only going to count, not those other ones. You've got Ring of Orient, blah blah. They're worth, quite a bit. There's hits here to be had. You feel good when you get them. What's the bottom end here? $34, $66 for Ritter. That's a bit unfair. Quite like Ritter. If we switch across to beta, you drop way lower, down to $14 instead of $34. So it's quite a lot, a lower end. But then you end up with, Philosopher's Stone, rightly or wrongly, worth way more than Ring of Oregon foil. And you've got some other pretty big hits here with the 3 non-ruby cores, and even Princess and Mirror Realm and stuff it's all pretty good. You've got some other hits here, but particularly the top end in beta there's quite a bit more meat at the top here. When I previously calculated it, the uniques here, their uniques are, I'll just put it here under value. We're averaging $90.46 compared to $75.15 in beta. So they were actually worth like 20% more in Arthurian Legends compared to beta. So I'm not sure why that's not, doesn't matter, it doesn't have a decimal place, but it is bugging me though. There we go, got it. So hopefully this is sort of illustrating the point here that I'm trying to make, because it's what I'm trying to say is, if you open up a box of Arthurian Legends, all of the value is here, and it's all sucked out of basically everywhere else. All of this is worth less, and it's transferred into that basically, and that's why you can't, or it's very difficult to open up. Well, it's basically impossible, pretty much, to open up a box of Arthurian Legends where you end up ahead, unless you opened up something unique or unique foil, or foil unique, or at least regular unique, like a Ring of Morrigan, and end up ahead. Like, it would be quite the craziest box ever that got no value from any of the uniques, but still ended up ahead somehow. Like, you would have to get a foil Valley Delight and a foil Archimago, pretty much. Well, you'd have, or a Courier, obviously, but yeah, I don't know if ever a box had been seen, and even then, right, like, you're still saying that MSRP is like $130. So even if you got them 2 cards, you would still be way behind, right? That's the thing. You would be at towards $100. You would still need another $30 just to break even though you got those 2 cards, which is kind of crazy, right? So, so at its core, that's the issue, I believe, is effectively that there are, however you want to cut it, there's either too many uniques compared to non-uniques, or there's not enough non-uniques compared to uniques. And that's the real issue here. Because of that, all the value was transferred into the uniques, and because of that, everything's really boom or bust. And then you have all the other issues that we've discussed that could have helped increase the value a bit. But even if Tawny and Bruin and Druid were foils, and even if did some of these other bits to help a bit, it still wouldn't change the fact that it would be completely boom or bust, and it's going to feel really bad when you bust, basically, and you're going to get a lot of people really upset with that experience. So how do you fix it? You just have less uniques, or like I'm saying, more of these, and something more like the beta set composition, and it will be very, it doesn't have to be the same size. I think part of it is at the end of the day with Arthurian Legends, it as far as I can understand, it was a constraint that they didn't have. I don't disagree. If you're going to do it well, and if you can't do a big set well, then do the set size that you can do well. Like, in the sentiment, I completely agree with. What could have you done? I think if you just had less uniques, it would have helped a bit. Could you have gone all the way down to 30? Don't know. Probably not. Not with it still feeling like an exciting set and so on. Could you have gone down at all? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know necessarily what the solutions are to this. There's a lot of constraints there with the smaller set and wanting to prioritize drafting and so on and so forth. I'm just really trying to highlight up what I think the real core of the issue is, which is this specific thing I'm talking about. It's about how distributed the value is across all of the cards or the rarities in the set, because if there's a chance that you can open up, for example, you can pull a foil exceptional, you can pull a foil ruins, for example, and you can feel awesome. And having that value, even just picking up a couple of foil ordinaries that are worth $15 or something, feels really good. So it isn't just about whether you end up ahead or behind in the money. It matters how many feel-good moments there are as well, obviously, but that's tied. It's all linked together. So there just needed to be additional value in the set. There's all sorts of random ideas that you could have to possibly have done something. I mean, one thing in particular that I assumed was going to happen with Arthurian Legends but didn't, when they were talking about it was optimized for a draft experience, I assumed that there would be, like, maybe there would still be a box topper, but there would be something like a box topper, like a sealed pack that would be for the winner of the draft, and that would have some like random variance in what could possibly be included in it. I assumed that would be that something like that would exist. Now, I don't know what would have been in there. Could have been anything, quite frankly, but I thought my thinking would be something like in there would be a scratch card type of thing for the winner, like the dust code on the bottom, but not on the bottom, so that you could actually give it to the winner, basically. So it'd be a dust code that they would scratch, but there's a chance that it might have more dust, there's a chance it might have a lot more dust, and there's a tiny chance that it might have some super special prize. Like, well, let your imagination run wild there. It could be anything, pretty much. So I think that's sort of all I really wanted to say. I think beta is something close to the ideal set size. Honestly, I think it's just, broadly speaking, you got to consider the nature of the set and stuff. But broadly, the issue here is that it needs to be way closer to this than this. This is this type of flat rarity. With how it all works, you basically kill all the value across everything that isn't unique if you do that, and I don't think that's good at all, doing that. People will just end up with absolute mountains of cards, again, from the smaller set and the box opening. Like, I'd hate to think how many of each Arthurian Legends Ordinary that we have that you can't do anything with, basically. Yeah, it doesn't feel good. Okay, so let's wrap this up. So, bringing all of this together, we got the fake uniques. We covered those off, the issues there. They feel bad. They also provide less value than just even regular elites. They're confusing and so on. We'll cover that off. That's an issue for sure. And obviously they don't exist in beta. you've got four. You normally have 5 uniques in a box, and the 20% chance you end up with 4, which basically means that you feel ripped off or unlucky. It feels bad, however you want to frame that. When you get that box that's only got 4, when you should have 5, as opposed to in beta, there's like a small chance that you might get an extra one, which feels good when you get it. The iconic cards in Arthurian Legends are mostly just trash in their power level. We covered that off list of the cards, but this is stuff like King Arthur, Merlin, Sir Lancelot, Queen Guinevere, Lady of the Lake, Excalibur, Round Table, Camelot. Again, I'm sure some people think Merlin's okay, but well, it's not the best card on the set, that's for sure. Not even in the top few. None of these cards are. Most of these cards are just complete trash as well. They're basically pretty either unplayable or fringe playable when constructed. Where you want, when I think of beta, for example, what are the iconic cards there? Philosopher's Stone, the Cause, the Alpha Frazetta arts like Death Dealer, Ruler of Thol, Quarters and Ties, Eric's Curiosa, which is a bit of a weird one, obviously, because it's probably by miles and miles the best card in the game, but that one's a bit different just because of the nature of what it does. But think of all those cards, they're all, Courtesan is probably the worst by a fair margin out of all of them, and she's still really good. And Philosopher's Stone and the Cause, Ruler of Thul, even Death Dealer are way better than any of those other cards. As I just said, pretty much the only iconic card that's any good in Arthurian Legends is Morgana. Obviously, Ring of Morrigan is a really good card, and maybe it, becomes iconic in regards to for sorcery and so on and so forth. But most people would never have heard of that in regards to what's iconic from the actual the Arthurian Legends or stories. So that's an issue effectively, because if some of those cards that I just described are actually really good, they would all be really valuable, and it would help increase the value there. You've only got one non-unique foil avatar that you can open it, and in the whole set, only one, right? It's just the Templar. That's the only one. There's only 3 avatars in the set. One of them you can't even open at all, which is a Druid, which is unique. And yeah, it's just Templar. That's the only one you can open in foil that isn't unique. As opposed to beta, for example, you've got 5 ordinary ones. You've got the Sorcerer and the 4 elemental ones. You've got 5 elite ones, I believe. Seer, Enchantress, Elementalist, Death Speaker, Battle Mage. I think that's it. So you've got 10 basically, and 5 of those are ordinary as well. So that's a lot of sort of value out there, because there's a lot of people that aren't that bothered about foils as such, but most people really happy to collect foil avatars pretty much. So that's an issue there. Could have I think the foil spell slinger could have been in this set to open. Pretty much, that would have added some value. I think the vanilla sites that are used in the draft kit, the full versions of those, could have been in this set to open as well. I get that they're in the dust store, but it's a similar sort of argument to before about the Druid foils, that's fine, but they could have been alternate art ones in the store in foil, and they still would have been really popular. So, and there's just a consideration here that there's only so much value you want to strip out of a set that's gasping for extra value, basically, and shifting that into the dust store, that wasn't even made available until, how long? It was only added in June 2025. Arthurian Legend's been out for ages now as well. So that's a consideration. You've got 24 packs in a box instead of 36, which means you have more variants, and because of that, more chance of just getting a really bad box as well, or even a bad case. And you just don't want people spending, $130 for a box and buying 6 boxes or something at that type of price, and then basically opening nothing of any value. We've opened a case that had a foil Rebix, and that was the only unique foil in all of it, and it didn't have a Ring of Morrigan or a Morgana in a whole case. So that's really bad, basically. And there will be people that's all they're going to get. That's going to be their whole experience, and their whole experience is going to be enough to potentially make them want to quit the game, pretty much, when they might have been completely all in for it. So that's a consideration as well. Obviously, it's not just because of less packs in the box. That means that it's all of these other factors as well that are all contributing towards that outcome. So, but less packs basically means more variants. So the higher MSRP combined with reduced value, if you're going to I'm not against, obviously everybody would rather pay less pretty much, but there's constraints and there's factors, and I'm not going to criticize the higher MSRP. So, but what I would criticize is the higher MSRP combined with reduced value as a combination. I think if you're going to increase the MSRP, you want to increase the value that you're giving people, or at the very least not reduce it, but ideally you would want to increase it. The smaller set size is an issue here for variants, basically, right? Of course there's going to be less variants if there's less cards in the set. That's obvious. But again, this is sort of a constraint. At the end of the day, I'm not going to criticize that. I think if you're basically saying could have had a bigger set as a second set, but it would have taken, let's say for argument's sake, 6 months longer to come out, I think it was way more important that the set came out 6 months sooner. Let's say it came out when Arthurian Legends did, rather than waiting a whole extra 6 months to get the set. So I'm not going to criticize that, but at the end of the day, it's certainly something that's contributing towards certainly contributing towards the problems. But ultimately, I would see that as a constraint that you just had to work around, and potentially a high MSRP that is that as well, right? So potentially those things are set in stone and you couldn't really shift them, and what you had to work with was everything else and all of these other issues we're talking about. And also the set composition, just basically having more uniques as a percentage of all the cards in the set. It's meaning that, which was the big part that we've talked about in this video, that you are effectively making everything else way more common, effectively, and all of the value thus gets concentrated into the uniques, which again makes it a very boom or bust box opening experience, and a lot of people are going to get burnt. So now, with a smaller set, is this even, how much could you realistically have done anything much about this anyway? Because in line, if you wanted to make it similar to beta, you would basically be saying that there would have been 20-something, maybe 30 sort of true unique cards, let's say, in the set. That would have had its own issues, like maybe collecting the full set would have been a little bit too easy as such, and you would sell less product that way as well. So, I'm not sure what the solution is there, but it's certainly a contributing factor and a problem. And yeah, we'll just keep an eye on that. But I think all of this basically comes together in creating basically an inferior box opening experience. So in a way it is, because the smaller set and the smaller box size of 24 packs instead of 36, but it could have been better than it was, in spite of let's say those constraints or those limitations. So I think that's all I really wanted to bring up, and yeah, hopefully if this can help make sets better in the future, because I think there's certainly creative ways that extra value could have been added, and it wouldn't have immediately fixed everything. Like I'm saying, you still ultimately would have had a smaller set, you would have had a higher MSRP, you would have had less packs in the box potentially, and so on. But just creating some extra value, I think, would have helped a lot as well. And there's so many, like potentially the Druid foil and the Tawny and the Bruin potentially could have been in. You potentially could have had the foil Spellslinger in. You potentially could have had those foil vanilla draft sites in. You potentially could have added some extra, like, which potentially could have just been elite. There's no reason that really needed to be unique. And there's just so many small things that could have been done, and any one of these individually probably wouldn't have done a lot. But if you had done all of what I just described, and then thought of that many more things 3 or 4 or 5 times over, and all of that value could have been pushed into the set. You potentially, like I said, you could have had some box topper that was more like a prize for winning the draft, and potentially that could have had some kind of something cool in there, or some kind of variant, like random element to it, or potentially added some value there. There are so many little things that you could have done that each individually would have added some value, and collectively all could have come together and helped to offset a lot of what we've just discussed. So I'm going to leave it at that. And I've actually just thought of, not even from my notes, I thought of another key issue here, which is that there are a couple of cycles of cards in particular in beta that help add a lot of value, especially in the foils, but even in the non-foils. And there aren't any such cycles, at least non-unique card cycles like this, and in Arthurian Legends, and having such cycles in future sets could help a lot to add a bit of extra value. So the couple I'm thinking of in particular are the exceptional jewel sites. Even just the raw exceptional cards themselves are sort of worth a couple bucks typically, and the foils can be worth quite a bit. I mean, I think in the case of the Ruins, it was like way over $100 even. And also the foil mixes, or the mixes, sorry, the mixes, non-foil and foil, there's some value there. So those two cycles help add a lot of value, and then talked about it before, but also just the avatars as well. They help add a lot of value in foil in particular as well. So it's just like having all of that missing from Arthurian Legends basically is an issue as well. So I would say, yeah, obviously you want a few more avatars in the set, especially not at unique level, and then ideally you have some sort of card cycles like the jewel sites or the mixers in a set as well, and then that would help. I don't mean any old cycle. Like, you have cycles in Arthurian Legends, like the Blacksmith family and whatever it is, Fisherman's family or whatever, but a cycle that people actually care about in Constructed. So it can't be any old cycle. The cards actually have to be good in Constructed for people to actually want them. And so the jewel sites in particular, they're just in so many deck lists. Basically, they're just like foundational, basically, to deck construction. So, and with people who want them in foil for sets, but also there will be plenty of people who want foil play sets of those, which helps pump that value up a lot. If you've got anything to add here, by all means, please say so in the comments. If you disagree with me on anything, please say so in the comments, and just be good to have some healthy discussion or about this. I think it's just, I haven't really heard any sort of well thought through, let's say, clear reasoning, clear thoughts on why the Arthurian Legends box opening experience was worse. And it's really all I've ever heard is something like it's because there's only 24 packs in the box instead of 36. If it was just 36, then everything would have been perfect. And no, I'm not saying it wouldn't have been improved or might have been a bit better for you, but it still would have been issues. It still wouldn't have just magically fixed everything. So just, I think hopefully this feedback we can keep tabs on the next set, and we can, and so on. We can feed all of this in and refine the thoughts over time, because no doubt that, I'm wrong about potentially some of these things as well, or at least maybe not, let's say, entirely correct. The thoughts in the right direction, but there's a bit more to it type of thing. So we'll see. But I think, if you keep these things in mind, just might help set expectations a bit better when you're opening Arthurian Legends boxes. That, to some large degree here, the best way to, if you want to offset the issues with the box opening experience, is to pay way less than MSRP straight away. You're in a much better position, obviously, if you can manage to do that. And there's a lot of places, especially in America, where you can get them for quite a bit under MSRP. So, that's already put you in good stead. If you're paying less, there's more. When you get a bad box, the loss isn't as big. But again, that's just not where you want to be, right? You want the shops to be able to sell it at MSRP, and people willing to pay MSRP and be happy to do so. That's really what you want. So it's just not ideal, and hopefully this is just something that is learned from, and things are done better in future sets, because it's just not good on the whole, I think. And it's a shame, really, because I just think it could have easily just been enough better to have just not felt so bad for so many people. Right, I'm just going to leave it at that. And yeah, I hope, by all means, leave any comments below. Disagree with anything I've said. Any suggestions, any discussion, anything. Because I think it's just, I want this committed to record. I want my sort of thoughts and theories about this, particularly about the set composition. I believe that's where the crux of all the issues are. Well, not all, but a lot of them are with the set. And I want it just, we can compare, for example, when the next set comes out, we can look back at this, we can see how the set does, we can compare it back to this, and it's something that we can keep up, we can update, and we can sort of, revise our vision on this whole concept over time. But I think it's good to sort of have something out there that says, if we have, how many uniques and elites and exceptionals and ordinaries should there be in a set? Because I don't think that the answer to that, it matters, basically, for sure it matters. I don't think it's the case that it's like you just throw in any old random numbers you want here and sort of think that that's not going to have any impact on anything. It for sure is. So I believe Jared and myself, we've got plans to catch up to do the drafting and sealed or like limited sorcery play, the first video on that series. So that should be the next one that comes out. So until then, keep safe, keep well, and keep enjoying your sorcery. Cheers.